Vikings. One word. And the movie starts playing in your head. Horned helmets, burning monasteries, burly, bearded guys chugging ale from horns and behaving badly. For 300 years, roughly 750 to 1050 AD, these guys from Scandinavia redrew the world map so drastically that we still feel the tremors today. They traded, raided, settled from the east coast of America all the way to the Asian steppes. But here's the paradox. There is hardly another ancient culture that we know so wrongly. We're used to seeing them through the eyes of their victims, or worse, through the eyes of Hollywood screenwriters. To us, Vikings are the medieval SWAT team, pure testosterone and maritime aggression. And, of course, the famous Viking funeral, that fiery show no movie can do without. It's all fun, sure, but behind these cliches, we've lost the actual people. People who exported not just violence, but ideas, technology, and culture. Vikings are ghosts. Literally, they died 1,000 years ago. But in our culture, they're more alive than ever, ready to be whatever we need them to be. Medieval monks? To them, Vikings were agents of the devil, or noble savages who just forgot to get baptized. By the way, the horned helmets. Probably the monk's idea, because enemies of Christ should have horns, right? Logic. Then the British chimed in. They desperately needed a grand origin story for their empire. Vikings? Perfect. Let's use them as a catalyst for greatness. Come the Enlightenment, they were scrubbed clean, groomed, and labeled noble barbarians. Victorian imperialists absolutely fell in love with them. They adapted Herbert Spencer's evolutionary theory and decided Viking brutality was just a boisterous teenage phase before becoming civilized Christians. Like, sure, you killed a few thousand people, but who didn't in their youth? All for the sake of progress. But there's a catch. The Scandinavians themselves played a huge role in this. In the 19th century, Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish historians started constructing the Viking Age out of sheer necessity. They were all suffering from phantom pains. Denmark had just lost a war to Prussia and needed the sedative of a glorious past. The Swedes were grieving the loss of Finland to Russia and sought comfort in nationalism. And the Norwegians, Gustav Storm basically turned history into a PR campaign, arguing that his guys were the ones who colonized Iceland and Greenland. Every nation was desperate for a golden age so they wouldn't feel like losers on the modern European map. And then we hit rock bottom, the Nazis. In the 20th century, they stole the Vikings, draped their racist fantasies over them, and declared them the Aryan archetype. Unfortunately, those stains on the reputation are still visible, and modern swastika lovers are still trying to co-opt Odin. Today, the pendulum has swung the other way. We modern humanists have a hard time accepting violence. So we've overcorrected, turning Vikings into cute traders and explorers. As one historian snarkily put it, we've almost convinced ourselves that Vikings were just a group of bearded tourists who roughed up the locals a bit. In the end, the real person, the farmer or sailor, has disappeared under the weight of all this nonsense we've piled on top. The word Viking, where did it come from? Linguists, as usual, are fighting about it. Some say it's from the Latin vicus, meaning camp or town. Others wave dictionaries and shout about the Old Norse vikja, to travel. A third group offers the simplest version. Vikings are people from Viken, the area around the Oslo fjord. Given how often those waters appear in the sagas, It's a solid theory. But if you landed in the 9th century and called a Scandinavian a Viking, he'd probably understand you, but he'd be confused if you thought it was his nationality. Because Viking isn't who you are, it's what you do. It's a job description. Vikinger in Old Norse basically means pirate, but originally a good pirate, one of us. Ancient skaldic poetry uses the word about 30 times, almost always with approval. It's about long-distance sea warriors. Runestones in Sweden and Denmark often say, "Para i Viking," to go on a Viking. A similar stone was found on the island of Gotland, Sweden, in 1988. The inscription on it reads, "Vater and Halta, they raised this stone in memory of Haile, their father. He was in the west with the Vikings." This is one of the few stones where the word Vikings is used to denote a group of people or a profession. The phrase "was in the west" almost always referred to expeditions to England. For the inhabitants of Gotland, this was a significant achievement, worthy of being memorialized on stone. So, going on a Viking meant leaving for a dangerous expedition for cash and glory. It was gig work. Think of it like working on an oil rig, but instead of oil, you're after silver and slaves. It's not an identity. Most of the time, these tough guys weren't burning monasteries. They were farming, trading furs, suing neighbors over stolen goats, and writing poetry so complex it looks like a crossword for geniuses. But we're lazy. We want one word. Slapping the pirate label on a whole region is easier than dealing with nuance.
Heathen longships have breached our shores. Take up your axe!
Father, they come not for war, they sail for Sigurd Red Ear's wedding.
Idiot, I'll excommunicate you and curse you! I said go and kill them all!
It only went sour at the end of the era when Christianity arrived. Being a pagan raider went out of style. There's a stone in Bro, Sweden, where a widow praises her husband Assur because he, get this, kept watch against Vikings. They went from heroes to threats. The term Viking Age is also something we made up. Was it really a unique era? Well, no one else at the time was crisscrossing Eurasia and the North Atlantic with such scale. They visited 40 modern countries. They encountered, and usually fought, 50 different cultures. This was a network. Yes, a network built on plunder and slave trade, but it ran like clockwork, from the markets of Baghdad to the coasts of America. And all without maps, compasses, or GPS, just wooden boats and pure adrenaline. So yes, the Viking Age existed. It was the moment the North woke up and decided it needed more space. Now the big question, how do we know what was in their heads? That's the problem. Vikings didn't write books. They were an oral culture. Sure, they had runes, but runes were for Bjorn was here graffiti or Odin rules. You can't carve memoirs on a rock. So their history is protohistory, history written by others. And who were these others? Mostly people the Vikings visited, uninvited. Imagine your biography being written by the guy whose house you just burned down. Will he be objective? Unlikely. Frankish annals, English chronicles, written by monks who, to put it mildly, didn't like Vikings. To them, our northern heroes weren't explorers. They were the Antichrist with an axe. Expecting a balanced analysis of Scandinavian poetry from a monk watching his abbey burn is like asking a turkey to write a Christmas cookbook. You're only going to get pain, horror, and a plea to God to make it stop. But there is another source. The sagas. Oh, the sagas. Think of them as an Icelandic soap opera, but with more blood feuds and decapitations. The problem? They were written in the 13th century, 200 or 300 years later. by Christians. Trusting the sagas is like learning about the Wild West by watching Clint Eastwood movies. The atmosphere is right, but the details, questionable. Still, they are masterpieces, not just fairy tales about dragons, though they have those too. Sagas of Icelanders are realistic dramas about farmers suing each other, killing over land, falling in love, hating, and trying to survive in a world where magic is as real as bad weather. And here's the amazing part. Why did medieval Christians preserve stories about their pagan ancestors with such love? Ancestors who, according to the church, should be burning in hell? Because pride was stronger than fear. They knew their ancestors weren't just pirates. They were people who dared to sail into the open ocean when everyone else was hugging the shore. Now let's touch on archaeology a bit. Archaeologists are people trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the dog ate the rest. We dig through trash, broken pots, leftovers, lost combs, rotted timber. Sometimes we get lucky. Graves. In graves, Vikings speak for themselves. Modern science works miracles here. Isotopes in teeth tell us where a person grew up. DNA shows us eye color. Yet, no matter how deep we dig, science can't put a moral compass under a microscope. We can reconstruct their bodies, but their morality is a completely different puzzle. So, our goal isn't to judge or excuse them. Vikings weren't bad or good. They were people of their time. Yes, they were brutal. Torture, ritual killing, slavery, it all happened. Let's not romanticize them. But there was another side. Complex, beautiful, deep. Their world was woven with magic. Their art and poetry reveal sophisticated minds. They didn't see themselves as barbarians. We think of their worldview as primitive. Thor, hammer, lightning, simple as a club to the face. In reality, their philosophy was so complex and depressive that any modern existentialist would be jealous. The core of it? Fate. For us, fate is something you change. I create my own happiness, life coaches, personal growth, all that. To a Viking, that's nonsense. Fate was hard-coded before you were born. 3 ladies, the Norns, have already spun the thread of your life. You can't change the length. You die exactly when appointed. They knew they would lose. Their entire religion is built on a massive spoiler. Everyone dies at the end. The gods will fall, the world will burn, chaos wins. Ragnarok is inevitable. The meaning of life isn't to win and float on clouds with harps. The meaning is to stand your ground beautifully, even knowing there's no chance. It's a religion of absolute fatalism and fierce courage. We're all going to die, so let's do it in a way that people will write songs about. That is the secret ingredient that turned simple farmers into the demons of the North. Thank you so much for watching. I would really appreciate your feedback in the comments, as well as a like and a subscription. And don't forget to follow me on X for a ton of interesting facts. Link in the description. See you next time.